Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're blessed to always be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport, who is overseas still on vacation with his lovely wife. Hopefully they're having a good time, but still joined us. I think he just told us, Omari, it's 11 o'clock or something like that over there. So appreciate him being here for this. On this episode, we're going to recap Summer League. We'll talk Ron Holland, Bobby Klintman, Jenkins, Tolu Smith, whoever you guys want to talk about, we'll talk about and kind of finish up Summer League. And then we will talk some rotation stuff, right, Omari? Yes, Matthew Harrison. But what time is it in Brazil, Omari? This will live on.
Don't ask me. I don't know.
Omari does not know what time it is.
I don't know what time it is in Detroit.
Yeah, I get confused with that every once in a while. So Omari doesn't know what day it is, so he definitely doesn't know what time it is.
No, today's Monday.
Today is Monday. Off season, he keeps track. We are a little bit late here. I was finishing up watching Team USA. I know, Omari, you tuned in at the very end of that as well. So I want to get your quick thoughts just on Team USA as we are about to enter the Olympics and the Olympics overall. One quick thing, again, guys, we can't stream on Twitter anymore. So if you know people that were watching on Twitter, tell them to come over here on YouTube, join us here live, or if you were doing that, we're going to try to get it up on the Free Press Instagram and Facebook. But as always, we appreciate you guys joining us live. Throw some questions in the chat. We'll keep track of them throughout the episode, answer them at the end, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Or if you're listening on podcasts, help us continue to get those ratings and reviews, get those things up so we can continue to get out to a bigger audience, especially as, a few months from now, we'll be entering the NBA season. But before we get to the Detroit Pistons in Summer League, we had a game on Sunday night, Omari. Interesting game. We got to see these guys for a lot of games, which I thought was really cool. What did you think about Team USA, just what you've seen so far? Do you have some concerns with these close games we've seen them play throughout these exhibitions?
I do have concerns and I don't. I just feel like they're not really taking it that seriously. And LeBron's the only one, for whatever reason, who's not on vacation mode right now. Like, they just don't seem locked in. Like, I'm sure that switch will turn on once they get to the actual action. And Germany, to their credit, is on paper, a better team than South Sudan, although South Sudan obviously really brought it last week. Where are you at on it, Bryce? Do you just see it as like it's summer, guys are just chilling until they really have to turn it on, or is this a team that's not going to go very far?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Omari, I watch these games and I realize they're exhibition and maybe they're not. I wonder if the rotations are going to change. I think when KD comes back, he'll start and then they'll play, I don't know what the lineup off the bench is going to be. Probably Ant and then Tatum. I like the Bam AD big man rotation there. And then you add in the fifth guy. Maybe you go a 9-man rotation and you stagger some things a little bit more. They've tended to do a little bit 5 in, 5 out. I'm interested to see how things play out. Cause I think these guys are used to playing 30 minutes a night, right? And now you're saying play 5 minutes and then go set for 7 or 8 minutes and then play 6 minutes, halftime, like that can't be easy to do. So whenever it gets to winning time in the actual Olympic Games, I'm interested. I'm also interested, like, is this, they brought the talent, but is it a situation where they end up having to say, hey, maybe we only bring 2 or 3 stars and we really do start building this out with like more team construction, like an NBA team? Because right now, this is a team other than Derek White and Drew Holiday of first and second options on their team. And now you're saying, hey, Devin Booker, be the 5th option on the floor. Joel Embiid, be the 4th option on the floor. And then that's not an easy role to fill. So it will be interesting. Maybe they blow through the Olympics, Omari, and we're sitting here going like we should have known all along because the talent level is ridiculous.
Yeah, the talent's definitely ridiculous. And yeah, I feel like they're just in vacation mode right now. Like it's a friendly, like we'll turn it up when we need to. But it's true. I mean, some of the offenses now revolve around a couple guys that, like now you have players who need to just spot up or, screen or, play those types of roles. And, it's not like back in the day when you had guys like Tim Duncan, who were, probably just doing those things anyway. So we'll see. But if nothing else, it's giving us a chance to watch LeBron play basketball and step up. Almost 40 years old. Like, it's still crazy. So
yeah, And he was incredible again today, just kind of close things out in the fourth quarter. Real quick, Olympics in general, you enjoy the Summer Olympics, track and field, gymnastics, swimming. We have all of this different stuff. I know in our household, we love the track and field stuff. We'll be locked in on that. Or are you kind of an Olympics guy, or you watch it just because nothing
Yeah,
else
for
is
sure.
on? Okay.
Yeah, like I like gymnastics. Like I've always enjoyed watching the swimming portion, like men's and women's. Diving has always been fun to watch. Like honestly, I'll turn on pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really matter to me. But I mean, of course, when you get to watch some of the top athletes, that's always fun too. But yeah, like I'll definitely, especially this time of year, like you never get like sports like this time of year, like you'll get baseball, and I'm not really a baseball guy. I don't know if you're a baseball guy, Bryce, but it's usually a dead period. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, not a baseball guy. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know that I could name 10 Major League Baseball players right now. Couldn't tell
Yeah.
you anybody on the Tigers. I don't know who's winning, who's losing, who the favorites are, anything like that. So I have no idea. But let's go ahead and get into Pistons now. We do have some Summer League to discuss, right? We got 5 games from most of these guys. Ron Holland missed, what was it, game 2 because it was a back-to-back, and he'd set out the first game of that back-to-back. But the other guys, we got 5. So let's just go one by one. Let's start with Ron Holland. Just the numbers to start us off, Omari. 18.8 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.3 assists, still and a half block, only 1 turnover. I think that's definitely something we should talk about at some point. 41% from the field on almost 18 attempts, 24% from 3 on a little over 4, 65% on 5 free throw attempts. 2 of those rebounds were offensive. What were your overall thoughts on Ron Holland? I know we saw a pretty good game on Sunday night, but 4-game sample size. What are your takeaways from watching him in Summer League?
Yeah, it's interesting that just in those first couple games, it seemed like he would be somebody who would be a little bit better against actual NBA guys, surrounded by NBA guys, just because of what he can do in space. And then as Summer League went on, they got him involved, just working in space a lot more. You can see his teammates looking for him in transition, and he was by far the best open floor threat on that team. It's kind of funny just how much his stats really just reflected where he was with the G League Ignite, right? Like he got points up however he could get them. The rebounding was there, like obviously the steals, blocks, like he had multiple of at least one of those categories at each game. The playmaking, like, I don't know if he's like a primary initiator type guy, but I think he could definitely keep the ball moving within the scheme of the offense. And then he got a couple threes to fall last night as well, which obviously was the big question mark. He only shot 24%. Didn't take a lot of attempts. Last night was probably the most he had taken. I think he took like 5 or 6 last night. But anyway, for the most part, he just looked as advertised, right? Like he did the things we knew he could do. He knocked out a couple threes, so he showed some promise there. And overall, I would say I'm certainly not lower on him than I was before. I think seeing how he can operate in those spaces as a cutter in transition, cleaned this up really well for this team. And I think especially after last night, you come away pretty encouraged about what he can do right now. And he's really good defensively already too. Like I got to give him credit for that as well. I thought he really moved his feet well, and the effort was always there too.
Yeah, I thought it was good to see some of the off-ball movement that he's able to provide, and the
Yeah.
offensive rebounding backs that up with 2 per game in probably less than 30 minutes a game. Yeah, 27.4 minutes per game. And so he was able to get 2 offensive rebounds a game. I thought we'll talk about Bobby Klintman as well and what we thought about him in totality, but I thought the Pistons got 2 of the best off-the-ball movers in the 2024 draft with Ron Holland and Bobby Klintman. Tristan Da Silva may be the best overall, but I think those 2 guys would be top 5 if we were just looking at this class as a whole. And Holland did that. We saw some cutting, we saw some transition. Let's stay offensively right here. What would be the biggest thing? Like, man, it would be really cool if he developed this between Summer League and the start of the season. And, the 3-point shooting is one thing, Omari, maybe a little bit more creativity with the handle. I thought he showed good touch around the rim, but I thought he struggled through contact at times around the rim. He struggled to finish and figure out some of that finishing over contest. Now, there was one game where he had 2 and 1s where he took the verticality, physicality, and was able to finish it. But then there were some other games where he got blocked. Maybe it was bad decisions. Maybe he should have kicked some of those. But what is the biggest thing you would go, man, if he bumped this 10% between now and September, that you would be really intrigued by on the offensive end?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 3-point shooting is the obvious one, but I would say what stood out early, even before he got his first three to fall, was his range in between. I think one of his first buckets was a little right-handed floater, and he
Yeah.
went to that push shot a few times. And just his overall touch around the rim, I thought seemed really, really solid. Like he just had a knack for, uh, you know, getting the ball on the right placements. And again, I think that in between range, if he's a guy that can not only finish pretty highly at the rim, but really work in that 4 to 9 feet range as well. I think that could really open things up for him. And I think guys that have that type of touch, you typically feel pretty good about them being able to expand their range as well. So for me, the outside shooting is not going to be as big an emphasis as a rookie. He's going to have some nights where he can knock a few down. It's probably going to be like any rookie a couple of years before he really gets used to the NBA pace and everything along with that. But if he can just be pretty solid from mid range and in that area, I thought he showed some promise there, and I think that's something that could carry over.
Yeah, YouTube user says, I don't know if he was talking about this. There's a separate conversation going on in the chat about Marcus Sasser right now, but summer league percentage is irrelevant to me. It's more about process and decision making. I wouldn't say it's irrelevant. I think it means something, but yeah, like guys can get on a heater for 4 games or they can go in a slump for 4 games. We saw Reed Shepard, who almost everybody would have said is the best floor spacer in the draft, not shoot extremely well during his games at summer league. Now it was impressive because he still scored 20 points a game, even not shooting it well from 3. But for Holland, it was about what type of shots was he taking? How did the jumper look? For me, the jumper, I still think it looks fluid. I don't think it's like crazy hitchy. Like I still find myself buying it. But I think what I noticed at times is it's a little bit of a left to right follow through. Like it kind of fades off to the right. With that, I think at times he's got to figure out how much elevation. Wes and I were talking about this, especially on his mid range jumper. He has a fall away lean to it, which I don't necessarily hate, but that adds a level of difficulty. Now, it also helps you get it over contests whenever you need to. So I'm a more of a believer in his jumper than maybe some of the other young guys on the roster, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be there year one, which leads to the next part of this conversation. And I don't want to go fully into the rotations just yet, Omari, but now that you've seen him in summer league, you saw other guys in summer league, you saw what Trajan Langdon did with the rest of this roster. How are you feeling about Ron Holland being the pick at number 5 and kind of how he fits into this roster right now as they added some veteran floor spacing, but you still have the young guys who don't in Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, and really Jaden Ivey?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could find a role, pretty solidly. But like, I don't know exactly where he would be in the pecking order. But if the defensive intensity carries over, he's a defensive playmaker. Like, it's one thing to just be able to stay in front of guys, but he produces a lot of turnovers as well. And if you could get enough shooting around him, like let's say you have Cade, Malik Beasley, maybe you have Tobias or Simone in there at the other forward spot, and Stu, you could just allow Ron Holland to just sort of run free, right? Like I think he would have open lanes to attack half court, and then you combine that again with the defensive effort, and you're probably looking at a guy who could, even if it's just 8-10 minutes a night, come in and make some sort of impact with the minutes he does play. So they're going to have to find the right balance because you also have a SAR. And I'm curious to the extent that those guys sort of eat into each other's minutes just because they are a little bit similar role wise and size wise as well. But overall, to me, that's his path, right? If just add defense, like add that emphasize on defense, and then offensively continue to attack open space and be the athletic finisher that this team is. Like, I wouldn't say that they're looking for it, but they have some guys who have not quite gotten there yet. So Ryan can also help fill that gap.
Yeah, Wes also mentions his knees collapse together on the jump shot. So
Yeah.
obviously some things for him to work with, things that Fred Vinson can start to work on, but thinking they're going to fix it in 2 months, like the muscle memory, breaking that down and reconfiguring it isn't an easy thing. That's not a short-term process for any of these guys. I don't think we should expect insane jumps here in the first offseason from Fred Vincent. It's funny you bring up Asar because every time I watch Summer League, I find myself going, man, I want to see this Asar and Ron Holland thing work together. And so that's the lineup I try to figure out in my head, not really as a starting lineup, even Omari, but as something coming off the bench of, okay, those are your 2 wings. Maybe you put a floor spacing big like Stu around them. And then whatever guard, another floor spacer, whether it's Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, and then a point guard, whether that's Jaden Ivey, maybe it is Cade, maybe it's Sasser, maybe it's a veteran. I know we had a question about that. We'll talk about that at the end. But I do find myself wanting to see 6, 7, 8 minutes of those two guys and what they can do specifically on the defensive end, just the ground coverage. That's one thing with Ron. He does get lost off ball a little bit, but he can cover ground when he does make a mistake. I think on the ball, let me ask you this. I don't think his defensive upside is as high as Asar's. Would you agree with that? Or do you think he has just as much potential?
I think Asar probably will end up having more defensive versatility, just because I think he's more of a pure leaper than Ron is, and we've seen him sort of make those rotations on defense. But perimeter wise, I would actually put those guys pretty closely to each other. Although Ron's obviously got to show that he could do it against the Shays of the world and those types of guys as well. So just because Asar already has a season, then I think you have to give him the nod at this point.
So Cruza says, I don't think the Pistons can get away with having Ron and Asar on the floor at the same time. I think I disagree a little bit. I mean, if by that account, then you can't play Asar and Duran together, or you can't play Asar and Ivy together. And if that's the case, then this is going to be really interesting how they're going to get these guys on the floor. I think there is I'm not saying it's perfect, Cruza. Like I understand there could still be some spacing concerns, but it could be an adventure. You're right. But I think we got to remember, guys, this isn't a team that's going to be in the play-in. They're not going to win 40, 50 games. And so I still think you want to try some of this stuff out for small segments at a time. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but if you put the right floor spacing around them, I do think it's possible, especially if Asar is improving with his passing. Like him being able to move the ball and do those things would be a huge part of that. Now, you definitely couldn't have a non-floor spacer on the floor like you couldn't have those two and Jalen Duren. Like that would be no way at all. I'm not saying you want to play major minutes of this 82-0 loading, says Chuck Brewer. Absolutely. That will probably go away fairly quickly. So, let's move on to.
I have a question. Yeah, just a quick question for you. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, but are you still seeing Ron as more of a 2-3 and Asar as a 3-4, or did Ron maybe show you a little bit more than you expected as maybe a bigger wing in summer league?
So Wes also says non-shooter versus bad shooter is also a thing. Duren and Asar are non-shooters right now. Yeah. Ivy and Holland are different degrees of bad shooters. I think I would agree with that in terms of complete non-floor spacers versus just guys that are bad floor space. Like you may still confuse. We saw people close out to Asar Thompson just because guys kind of forget the scouting report or whatever. I assume that's going to happen with Ron Holland as well. But to answer your question, I think we had this. Yeah, Big Cheese said, should Holland play more minutes at the 2 or at the 3? Those things are a little bit interchangeable to me. What I would say is Ron shouldn't be, definitely not your primary initiator at all. Like that's not a thing at all to me. He is completely an off the ball player in my opinion, Omari. I also don't think he's a 4. I don't think he plays big enough to be a forward. Like that's why I don't call him a forward. I think Asar I would categorize as a wing / forward, because I do think his athleticism, size, even looked bigger at Summer League. I know we got some comments about that on Twitter, and just seeing him walk by, someone comment like, look at his arms. They definitely look bigger. I think Asar can moonlight at the 4 and be fine with that. I don't see that with Ron. I see him as a 2-3. Like he is a true wing to me. Off the ball wing is how I would look at Ron. He can't be your primary guy. I don't even love him like as a secondary creator, but I think he can do that enough. I love Ron Holland when the advantage has been created for him and then he can attack that downhill finish. And honestly, I didn't think his decision-making was that bad. Just going back to 1 turnover per game with the amount of usage he had, I don't think he was just doing crazy things decision-making wise. He may not have been a great creator, but I don't think he was bad with his decision-making. So what did you think? Did you see some forwardy type stuff where maybe he could moonlight at the 4 position for this team?
I do see him as much more of a 2 and 3 right now for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. Some of that's like frame related too. Like he's just a bit wiry. I mean, he has like a 18, 19-year-old's frame. Like he'll add, some muscle as he gets earlier in his career. But I don't know if I want him defending players bigger than him right now. Like, I think you could probably put him on other wings. I mean, he's 6'7" without shoes. Like you're looking at 6'8" with shoes, 6'11" wingspan. You could play him, I think, 2 and 3, maybe a small ball 4 against certain lineups. But I think you could probably put him defensively on any 2 or 3 in the league and feel pretty good about it.
I don't think they need him at the 4 though. They paid Tobias Harris $26 million to come in and play. Yeah. The only way that ends up being something I'm upset about is if they don't play him 30 minutes a night, or obviously if he plays awful because of whatever reason. That's not something I anticipate. So you're looking at 30 minutes right there from him. I think Asar at the 4 makes sense. Fontecchio at the 4 would be very interesting. I think there's some lineups where you do that just because of the floor spacing stuff. I think there's going to be nights where Isaiah does still play at the 4. Again, hopefully it's more at the 5, but there are some nights and some minutes where he plays at the 4. So I don't think he'll be asked to do that barring injuries or, something with that. So I don't think he has to. Right quick before we go to break, Devon says, I never catch this live. Appreciate you.
Happy to have you.
Glad you were able to. Again, guys, get in some questions. We'll take those at the end. But right now, we're going to go to a short break. Omari, when we come back, let's talk Bobby Klintman. Marcus Sasser's a guy we definitely need to talk about. And then we can touch quickly on Danis Jenkins and Tolu Smith before we get into the bigger picture of the rotations.
All right, we're back with segment 2. Let's open up with Bobby Klintman. He was probably the guy that exited Summer League, at least from the Pistons side, with the highest reviews. Just in what you saw from him scouting-wise, and then what he showed in Summer League, particularly as a passer, how taken aback were you with just some of the passes he was able to throw with ease? I mean, he probably left 5-6 assists, if not 7, on the table over the course of the entire week.
Yeah, so Klintman, just the stats real quick. Oh no, just under 30 minutes, 11.2 points, 7.2 rebounds. That's something I think we need to talk about as well. 3.8 assists, 1 steal, half a block, 2 turnovers on 42% from the field, 10 attempts, 42% from 3 on over 6, 50% from the free throw line on 0.4. So what, that's 2 attempts or something like that is all he got from the free throw line. My overarching view, Omari, was the shooting looked really good. I thought he shot the ball well. I've always believed in Bobby Klintman's jumper. I thought it was real. You can see he needs the step, the gather, the 1-2 into it, and it looks very fluid and confident. So when he gets that, it looks good. The passing was unbelievable. Unreal. Because
almost a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio is insane.
Yeah. And then obviously we watched every second of it, and probably most of our listeners do, because if you're listening to the Pistons Pulse, you're probably a diehard like we are whenever you're just kind of nerding out and geeking out on this stuff. I thought his passing went beyond even those numbers. I thought it just really, really stood out. He struggles to put it on the deck. I thought the ball handling was an issue. He struggled with that. I thought the off-ball movement, cutting, offensive rebounding, as I mentioned earlier, was good. That was something pre-draft that I loved about him. I didn't love the passing pre-draft, so this was something that surprised me a little bit. Defensively, there's some work to do. Bobby really struggled off the ball, specifically the last 2 games. I had a lot of notes of him getting beat backdoor. Pakum Dadie had like 3 backdoor cuts on him just in that Knicks game. And then somebody got him in this last game on Sunday night as well. So I think that may be the biggest place for Klintman is, okay, continue to knock down shots, but he's got to figure out that off-ball defense, kind of that engagement and not getting beat backdoor. He can't be a negative with those type of things.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And you wonder how much of that is, just something he needs to work on, or just the overall pace of Summer League.
Yeah.
Seems like especially those first 3.5 games were just extremely chaotic. I think Klintman, I did come away wondering if he is a 4, just because he does have so much of a slim frame. And I think Patrick Heights actually mentioned that here. Bobby seems like a jumbo 2-3 to Nick Batum type of role. I don't know that he's a big. Where are you as far as that? I still think there are lineups where he could play the 4, but I did come away from this thinking maybe he is a little bit more of a 3, just because he does have a little bit more of a slight frame.
Yeah, I don't think he's a big at all. I think in my pre-draft scouting, I almost labeled him a wing/forward because of that slight frame, where I think somebody mentioned, potentially playing the 2. I'm not sure he's a 2. I think he's a 3-4. I think he's a wing forward. Hopefully, as his body fills out, he's a true forward that really fills into that 4-man spot. This is an archetype and a role that we've talked a lot about that the Pistons seem to struggle to fill, which, the signing of Tobias Harris fills that at least for a couple of years. And Patrick also brings up, where I brought up the off-ball defense was a negative. He's worried about on the ball. Yeah, defense is a real concern. He doesn't make a ton of plays defensively. Would nice to see him with some like low man rim protection, those type of things. I thought the offensive and defensive rebounding was a positive. Rebounding was a very good thing to see from him. I don't see him, I know people got excited, and I understand why, because he is a bigger player that passed the ball well and knocked down threes. I don't see the path to minutes this year anyway. Maybe I'm wrong. One, we just talked about Tobias Harris and Asar and Ron and Fontecchio.
Montecchio.
Yeah, all of these guys are going to need minutes anyway. And, you could even slide Tim Hardaway Jr. to the 3 at times. Or if you want to play 2 guards and play Cade as your pseudo 3. So I don't see the path to minutes for Bobby. So I'm not worried about him right now. But he does need to fill, as Big Cheese says, he does need to fill out to be able to truly play as a 4 moving forward. And at pick 37, I thought he looked really good. The returns on a second round pick looked really good for me. And I'm excited. This was a guy I had as a borderline first round pick. So I liked the pick then. And Summer League gave me no reason not to think the same thing.
Yeah, no, I thought the passing for sure was just really impressive to see from him. You go back and I did read some, what other people thought of Klintman before the draft. So some people did point the passing out, but the reality is that he averaged.
For the record, real quick, Sam liked his passing. That was something Sam brought up all the time.
Yeah, but he averaged less than an assist per game in Australia last year. He averaged under an assist at Wake Forest the year before, with more than twice the turnovers per game. I think in like both seasons. I think at Wake Forest he might have turned it over almost 3 times more than he assisted it. So it could. I don't know if that's just him stepping into a more modern NBA scheme with guys who can make plays happen off ball that tapped into that aspect of his game. But if he could really pass it, I do wonder if that could open up minutes for him that he may not have gotten otherwise. And I think regardless, he's going to need some injury help just because they do have options at the 4 who are more proven at this point. But overall, I agree with you. I thought for the 37th pick, Klintman really did show a lot that you would want to be. Let's talk about Sasser real quick. He did find his shot a little bit toward the end, but I think the question with him coming in was can he be that backup point guard this team needs, right? And I don't know if we saw that. Where are you at overall with what Sasser did in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so Chuck Brewer asked this question. Summer League is to work on things, but did Sasser help or hurt his future with the team? I don't know. Like, it's so hard right now because I feel like at one point we felt like we had an idea of who Troy Weaver preferred, who we liked, what he liked, who he was in on, and all of those type of things. Now with Trajan Langdon, outside of taking Ron Holland 5th, obviously you would think he really liked Ron Holland. He didn't even trade back. He just stayed at 5 and took him. Bobby Klintman, the free agent sightings, all of those things. Those are the only guys we really know what Trajan truly feels about. And not only that, then we bring in, a new coaching staff as well. So I don't know how the organization feels about him in general. I will say, I don't think this was an overly positive summer league for Marcus Sasser. I do agree that summer league is a place to work on things where you can go outside of what you do. So for Sasser, trying to play him as a true point guard, or I don't think he was trying to do that though. Like, I didn't see that in his game in regard, like he did average 5 assists, but 3.5 turnovers. I thought Jenkins attacking and creating for others stood out more to me than Sasser's did. I don't care that Sasser didn't shoot it well. We know that he's going to be able to knock down shots. We've seen that at the NBA level. And, again, these guys go through ups and downs. All this did for me, Omari, was reinforce the role that I think Marcus Sasser should be in, which is an off-the-ball guard, off the bench, who knocks down shots. I put it in my notes that I think the best shot I liked for him, it was after a timeout, baseline out of bounds, comes off a screen, catch, right into a shot, nails it. That's what I like to see from Marcus Sasser. And then maybe a little bit more of a bulldog on the defensive end on the ball. I don't look at Marcus Sasser as a true point guard creator. I don't know. I just don't see that in his game. I don't want him playing that role. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I don't see that as that being his game either. He just attacks the game far more naturally as a attacker. Like, he's going to come in, he's going to get some shots off. He's not a guy who's going to be pounding the ball in like pick and roll situations, right? Or running those types of plays. And I think that's what I don't think it makes his fit tough, because you do have some bigger ball handlers that you can play him off of. But the reality is that he doesn't necessarily address an area of weakness now that you have Malik Beasley on the roster too. And you can never have too many shooters. It's not like, Sasser no longer has a role, because just as a shooter, he does have a role. I'm just curious on this roster, and especially with the way their guard rotation set out, how their guard rotation shakes out, how Sasser acclimates, given that I think the Summer League did show that he's probably not going to be a natural one. He's more of a 2 who can handle some of that.
Yeah, like when I go through the rotations, I have a hard time penciling him in. If I just said, okay, opening night, everybody's healthy, they run their full rotation, no minutes restrictions, nothing like that. I have a hard time penciling him in, even in the second unit, because for me, not to like bury the lead here, whether we get into it in this episode or at some point, we're gonna do a whole lineup episode. It's kind of a tradition, but I see Jaden Ivey playing as the backup quote unquote point guard. And then, but like you said, you saw Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley. One reason I liked the Sasser selection at the time was I did think he fit well next to a jumbo-ish creator like Cade Cunningham. But I think Sasser's minutes come from, I think it's been bench depth. I think he's the fifth guard, and that is good. Patrick brings up a good point. That is good for the Pistons. Tim Hardaway Jr. misses a game or Ivy rolls an ankle, whatever it is. If Marcus Sasser is the guy that steps in to take those minutes off the bench, I don't think that's a bad thing. That's just the role I see for him. That's not even awful. I don't know what the normal return for the end of the first round pick is, but if he ends up being this for a couple years and then he is able to really be like the fourth guy, like really supplant himself in the rotation, that's good return. This is an interesting one. I don't want to be here. Well, that's not very nice. No, that's his YouTube, his or her YouTube name. Hopefully you at least want to be here at the Pistons Pulse. Is Sasser the second best guard defensively? So my initial answer, Omari, was no, because I don't think he's been as good defensively as I thought he was going to be coming into the league. But I don't have an answer for who's better. It's not J.I. It's not Tim Hardaway Jr.
Cade can be.
Maybe.
Cade can be. I think we've seen him at that level more so maybe his rookie year than.
Just because of size? Like that would be the other thing with Malik. Is Malik Beasley a little bit better just because he's a little bit bigger and more of a vet?
Yeah.
I think that's very telling of where this team is defensively, especially at the guard position. Like that's very telling.
Defensive guys are much more, I think, in the forward rotation. They're guards, and they've been in this spot for a minute, but they just need their guards to, like Ivy, like Cade, they just have to lock in defensively. Like that's really it. That's been the plan.
They said, I don't want my YouTube name to be my real name. Love the pod. We appreciate we were just having fun with you. And of course, I understand not wanting to put your real name out there with that thing. Having you guys say my full name makes me want to change my name. Well, Patrick, I'm not saying your last name because I'm going to mess it up. So I apologize.
I said Heinz earlier. I hope that was correct.
Hopefully that's correct. Yeah. It's very stressful, Omari. Very stressful trying to make sure we get people's names right. And
people always get my name wrong. So I just expect that that's like, I've accepted that that's part of life. I'm going to mess up some names. It's nothing personal. I've had to forgive people just to, like they're not trying to offend me. They're not trying to mess my name up. So I'm giving them that grace.
Nobody does it on purpose. But yeah, that was a great question because I feel like it kind of hits there. And again, shows how important Asar is defensively, how important a guy like Ron Holland could be defensively, and also how important it is that the bigs step up, especially Jalen Duren, but, Isaiah Stewart and the rim protection and maybe the switchability he can provide and what Paul Reed can give as a big as well, because they're not exactly loaded at the guard position on the defensive end. So Devin says everyone gets my name wrong. I wasn't sure. So let's talk. Do you want to go to, are we good with Sasser? I think we've talked about that.
Yeah, we can talk about Danis Jenkins and maybe one or two other guys really quick. Like Danis obviously came in on a two-way, not a super highly heralded guy. He came in on like a prove-it situation. And I thought he played with a lot of fire. I thought he could really heat up defensively from three. I thought he had some nice defensive moments. And playmaking-wise, I don't know if he's a primary guy or more of a secondary, but I thought he did assert himself playmaking-wise, especially in those earlier games where nobody really stepped up on that front outside of Klintman. So I did come away, a little bit impressed by Jenkins. He's 6'4", he's got good size. I thought he played with some fire. I thought he played pretty well.
Yeah, so 5 games, 26 minutes a game, 9.6 points, 3.2 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.2 steals, and 1.2 blocks. Omari, we got to talk about the block shots at some point.
Yeah, he's a playmaker defensively for sure.
Yeah, 1.8 turnovers, 35% from the field, not great, 33% from three, 92% from the free throw line. I think that was a big thing. He's not a guy that's going to score at the rim. he was able to get into the paint. I thought he had like some twitchy, explosive first step and change of speed, change of direction stuff. So I like seeing that offensively. When he was making shots, it looked really good, especially from three. I think that's kind of what he's going to do. I thought defensively is where he stood out to me. I thought he was a really good ball screen navigator. And I went back and found a scouting report from Urson Dimmer. I hope I say his name right. And I tweeted this out, guys. So if you follow me on Twitter at Motor City Hoops, you can see his pre-draft scout. And he brought this up with Danis Jenkins as well, how good he was navigating ball screens. And I think that's really good film to watch if you kind of want to see what it's like. He does a great job of it. And I just found myself going, man, if Jaden Ivey would do this, if Marcus Sasser would do this, it would look really good. And that helps the bigs out a lot. So Danis was interesting. I don't know that I'm like, hey, put him on the standard roster at all, but I love him being on the two-way. I think that's a good spot for him. He can come up and play if there's crazy injuries or maybe they get to the end of the year or something like that. But here's what I love about it. That's a great guy to run your G League. That's a great guy to run the Motor City Cruise this year and make sure the other guys like a Bobby Klintman are getting the shots they're supposed to be getting.
Yeah, and Jenkins too. Just some of the threes he hit. I know that 3-point percentage didn't look great, but he had a game where he hit 6. I think that was either game 2 or game 3. And yeah, absolutely. Like I agree. I think he's somebody that you could look forward to watching with the Motor City Cruise. Just seeing how his athleticism translates. If he could really, be a playmaker. He did average more than 2 assists for every turnover, which is pretty good. So I'm very curious to watch more of him and see who he can become. We still have about 4 minutes left of this segment. Let's talk about Tolu Smith.
Yeah, we got that. So Steven Suggs says, what about Tolu Smith? Do you think he's at least earned a spot in the G League Cruise? Yes, 1000%. I think if they can get him on the cruise, that would be awesome. YouTube user says, isn't an NBA athlete, but showed nice in summer league. I think the athleticism, Omari, is probably what's keeping me from saying, hey, give him that third two-way spot. He isn't, he doesn't have great length either. I looked at his standing reach today compared to some other guys. Didn't really stand out for a big, but man, he flashed a lot of things. Seemed like one time a game, he went to that spin move, finished with his left hand. So I thought he earned I thought he earned a spot to definitely be on the G League roster.
Yeah, I mean, he has some moves down low. He rebounded pretty well. I thought he had some nice passes even. And he got to the line a good amount as well. I would for sure, pencil him in as a Motor City Cruise guy just based off of his summer league production.
Yeah, 11 points and 9 rebounds, almost 4 offensive rebounds. That's a nice big. I thought he did a good job recovering in ball screen situation. Like that's another guy. Like you put Jenkins out there, you put Bobby out there, you put Tolu out there, and then you surround that with some other guys. And that's an interesting, Tosan, we didn't see play, but he's on a two-way right now. That's just an interesting G League roster to put together. I got to shout this out. Where's our guy from Brazil? We have people asking for it. So if you listen later on, I think it's Matthew. If you're listening to this later on, make sure you were missed, my guy. So we always appreciate you joining in. Was there anybody else? I mean, I guess you can go more on Tolu if you want. Anybody else that stood out? Aaron Estrada flashed a little bit.
Yeah, I thought Estrada had some plays. I thought Jalen Slauson had some nice plays, especially on defense. McCoy, I thought asserted himself more as a playmaker late. And Jace Johnson too. And I think he's been in the G League for a couple of years, but he was really productive as just an interior scorer and rebounder. So I thought a few guys on this team ended up standing out in the minutes that they did play. Javonte McCoy, Javonte McCoy. I thought he had some nice moments toward the last 2 games.
Yeah, Wes brings up Sam Peake, who flashed more so in this most recent game as well. So listen, this is how like we're all in on this, Omari. We've spent the last 5-10 minutes talking Danis Jenkins, Tolu Smith, Sam Peake, Jalen Slauson, Aaron Estrada. That's what we do here. Like we're not just talking 40 minutes of Ron Holland and Bobby Klintman and Marcus Sasser. We're getting into
We're doing a deep dive.
We're doing a deep dive. That's what we do. We're geeking out. We're sickos, as they like to call it in the NBA draft world. Whenever you go to the under radar guys, you're considered a sicko.
I mean, look, we're in like the dog days of the season at this point. So, I don't know. In 2 weeks, we might just be talking Olympics and Jimmy John's. That's the only sub shop you have down there, right?
Jimmy John's. I love it.
we may we may have to revisit that.
So that's going to lead us right into the question we're going to go to after the break. We'll answer you guys' questions. We have 5 in the queue. So if you have something you've been wanting to ask, this is the episode to do it. We'll get to it. But also, Omari, we can get into the rotation stuff. I have some questions, some certain lineups. I don't want to go all in because we do have 2 months of content we have to fill, but we can get into that stuff a little bit now that it looks like the offseason is somewhat over. We'll get into that question right after this break, though.
All right, we're back with segment 3. We're going to talk about the rotations a little bit. But first, we'll lead off with Derek Brown here. Do you guys find it hard to come up with content in the summer? I would say honestly, it hasn't really been super hard. Just because we could just fall back on just riffing and teasing each other if everything else fails. Like I remember we had Laz on a couple years, and the combo just completely descended into chaos for like the last 20 minutes. But we'll see this year. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe they'll bail us out with another trade at some point, but it definitely can be challenging, especially when you get to August and there's just like nothing going on at all.
Yeah, Wes says, nah, we just get to have more fun. That's true. There'll be more sheet or sham. We'll come up with some game. Like we do, I think we do like drafting things, trying to draft the best teams and stuff like that. The other thing is because of the moves, I assume we'll have Keith Smith on soon. We'll have Laz on soon. Maybe we'll bring Sam back on. And with those guys, then we can revisit the entirety of the offseason. What did they think about the different moves that were made, the draft picks? So you can go to that well a little bit also. I will say I do stress about it more than I do during the regular season. Regular season is pretty easy, right? The offseason, trade deadline, all of that. We didn't even have an outline for this episode, to be honest with you guys. This is one of the first times. Wes is overseas, so obviously we weren't going to ask him to do that, but we just showed up and we started talking. I don't know that we could do that over the next 7 or 8 episodes, though. We're going to have to come up with a little bit of a plan. And that's why we pay Wes the big bucks, is because he's the one that locks that in for us.
Yeah, we'll see. I typically like the time where we just have to literally come up with content. But again, we'll definitely do some sheet and sham. We'll do all of that, and we'll try to have some fun with it this year. Bryce, just touching on the rotations real quick. Who's your starting 5 right now? Like if you had to, like if the regular season starts tomorrow, like who are you starting?
Yeah, so here Steven says there's 13 guys on this team who are rotation guys. So which 3 guys are the odd men out? So if I really just had to nail something down, I think I would give preference to the guys that are a little bit older in terms of the draft. And so I want to find out what Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren are. So right now, today, with the caveat that maybe somebody comes at me with an argument that convinces me otherwise. Wes, you get in this as well. Put yours in the private chat.
It's in there. I think me and Wes are aligned.
Okay, so I would say Cade, Jaden, Tech, Harris, and Duren.
Okay, so we're all on the same page.
Is that what he said also?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's no fun. What's wrong with us? This is boring.
It's like when we all agree. We need some debate.
And so my thing is you get one non-shooter, Jalen Duren, and one bad shooter, Jaden Ivey. Put the ball in Cade's hands, and then you have 2 floor spacers in Tech and Harris. I like how those fill out. The other thing we have to remember with Sasser is the injury, the blood clots. Like, what has this offseason been? Do you want to work him in a little bit slowly? Stuff like that. And then as K-Barb says, Ivy backup point guard, Jaden Ivey would be my first sub, and it would be pretty quick. It would be like 5 minutes, and I would sub Jaden Ivey out, and I would put in Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley, Omari. And then when I brought in one of those guys, I would sub out Tech or Harris, and I would bring in Sasser 5 minutes into the game. And then when I was ready to bring in Ron Holland, maybe I sub Duren out and I bring in Stu. So that's kind of how I see this thing playing out.
So we all had the same starting 5. So let's do like first 5 off the bench. And this would probably vary depending on matchup and whatnot. But you mentioned Holland, you mentioned Sasser, but just let's assume everybody has full health and everything. Who, like, if you have a full 10-man rotation, who's at 6 through 10?
So if I stay with those 5 starters, I think Stu's the 5 off the bench right now. I would then consider Sasser to be the 4, Holland to be the 3. What I haven't quite reconciled is, do I Can I get, yeah, I think I can. So then Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley would be my twos, like my 1-2,
Yeah.
but Ivy would actually play as the backup point guard. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I would bring in Tim Hardaway Jr. and then my backup unit would be Ivy and Beasley. So I guess I would leave out what's that leaving out? Sasser,
These out Sasser, Klintman, Wendell Moore,
and Paul Reed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think Paul Reed plays whenever there's some minutes at the 4 for Stu. Like maybe you play a bigger team and you don't play Holland that night and play Stu at the 4 and you play those guys together. Yeah. Obviously injuries. And then Sasser same thing. We talked about this at the guard spot.
Yeah. So I think if you have those 4 on the outside, I won't say the only guy, but you did acquire Paul Reed, who, I'd be curious. Like we've talked about Paul Reed a little bit, but do you have to play Paul Reed, or are you comfortable with him just being like your third big? Like, does he push Duren and Stu for minutes?
Yeah, I would say no, but I don't know how Paul Reed feels. And you claimed him off. Like the contract doesn't say it, right? To me, Tobias's contract says it. I even think giving up Quentin Grimes in that trade for Tim Hardaway Jr. and the fact that you have all these young non-shooters means Tim Hardaway Jr. probably needs to play. My guess is you got Malik Beasley to come because you were going to play him minutes and at least he spaces the floor. I don't necessarily feel the same about Paul Reed. To me, Paul Reed was like, let's get him on the team. If we get a great trade option for Isaiah Stewart, that gives us a big, he's going to get to play though, right? Like those two aren't going to play 82 games and not be in foul trouble and all of that. I think you can keep Paul Reed happy before having to move on from anybody. But for me, he would be the third center, I guess, because I want to see Stu play. I think this is why I don't want to start Isaiah Stewart I think he's finally has the chance to be in the role that he can actually be good in, which is a big off the bench.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like he's going to play just because of foul trouble or injuries or whatnot. I think Stu's missed consistently like 12 to 15 games a season just because of a variety of stuff. And it's just weird because I feel like the Pistons have not really been in a position where they have 3 clear rotation bigs who all bring a little bit of something different. But I think bottom line, especially with Duren being a year away from extension eligibility, you really have to figure out what you have in Duren. Not that I think anybody was questioning if he would have his minutes cut into anyway. But absolutely, I think you start Duren, you figure out what he can be, especially defensively. And I think what hurts Paul Reed too is also just the fact that Stu is the only one of those 3 who can shoot somewhat at volume and with like a decent clip, right? So just rotation wise, you want to have that stretch 5 in that group. Maybe against Boston or some teams you play all 3 bigs, you play Stu at the 4 a little bit more. I think it gives you more flexibility than you've had in past seasons.
Yeah, I was looking up Paul Reed's 3-point shooting just to kind of compare to Isaiah Stewart. So
yeah,
Stu, okay, so yeah, I mean, this is kind of crazy. Stu's rookie year, he shot 63 threes at 33%. Paul Reed for his career has shot 77 at 31. Now, this last year, he did shoot 57 and shot 37%. But Stu shot 205 2 years ago in 50 games and 175 this last year in 46 games at 38% this past season. So Stu shot almost 500 in his career at 35%. So that, I mean, I think right now, if you have to believe in one as a floor spacer, it's Isaiah Stewart. But as I read that, Omari, the last 2 years, Isaiah Stewart, 50 games, 46 games. So
yeah, that's like, I just remember I said 12 to 15. No, that's more than 12 to 15 games.
Yeah, so, that's quite a bit. And then if you look at Jalen Duren, I feel like there's been some ankle injuries. Yeah, 67 and 61. So, maybe those. Yeah, thank you, John. Milroy says, caught the live stream. Love you guys that are able to catch us on those. And then obviously the ones that are here every time, but all of you guys, if those don't overlap, which if they do overlap, then he's starting and playing a ton of minutes. But if they don't, you're looking at what? Let's say 20 games for Stu, 10 for Duren. That's 30 games where he's the second big, and playing plenty of minutes, let alone foul trouble. So I think there's enough minutes for Paul Reed. Straight up. I think there is. I think Klintman, I'm not worried about him getting NBA minutes. Sasser's the one. But again, Arcade, Ivy, THJ, Malik Beasley, are those guys going to, they're not all playing 82 games. I will say
Right.
one thing I liked about what Trajan did with the offseason guys, the vets, is a lot of those guys have played a lot of minutes over the last 5 seasons. So I do like that about Trajan and what he valued and brought in.
No doubt, no doubt. I have one last rotation question for you before we move on to some of these questions, just because we have about 10 minutes
Yep.
left. Wide open. We've talked about the lack of depth they have as far as like true point guards. Do you go after? And I think this was actually one of our
Big
questions.
cheese right here.
Yeah,
Yep.
which leads us right into it. Do you get a DSJ or a Tyus, or do you value the flexibility you have with that open roster spot?
Man, I've gone back and forth with this.
Yeah.
I would love the idea of Tyus Jones. My thing with bringing in Tyus is, again, he's going to want to play. If
I think
Tyus,
you have to play Tyus if you have him.
yeah, he's too good
Yeah.
not to. And if he comes to Detroit, it's on a 1-year deal. It's to bring his stock back up, right? To then hit free agency next year. So now there's no minutes left for Jaden Ivey to play with the ball in his hands. And so like, that's my thing. It's hard to argue bringing in the talent, but is it at the expense of the development of Jaden Ivey? My vibe right now is find that third point guard who is the Paul Reed that's not going to be upset if maybe Paul Reed will, I don't know. Find the point guard who won't be crazy upset if they're not playing night in and night out, but will be ready whenever the time comes to come in and just do what needs to be done. I don't think that's Tyus Jones. Is that Dennis Smith Jr.? Maybe. And Dennis Smith Jr. has become you know what Dennis Smith Jr. would be day one? The best guard defender on this team day one, hands down, no question. I'm a little bit more interested in DSJ because I wonder if he would take that role, but I'm kind of surprised neither of these guys are on a roster right now.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. I think Markelle Fultz is still out there too, and just because of the shooting, I don't know if he's as well of a half court. I don't know if he's as good of a fit, but to me, if you could get Tyus, you just go get Tyus.
It's hard to say no because he's so good, right?
Because he's so good. Like you put him next to Cade, and it's just perfect, rock solid. Like he's elite shooter, elite passer. Like he just fills so many holes for you. He basically does what Monte Morris did for you last year, except he might actually still be a bit better than Monte Morris. What they need is like a Corey Joseph.
I think he is at this point. I think he is better than Monte. Yeah, Corey Joseph. People are gonna be upset with that one. No, that honestly, that's the guy at this point in his career, right? Yeah. I mean, just because I'm trying to look through free agencies that are still available, and there's not that vet, right? Like a lot of these guys. So let's look at you. Markelle Fultz is out there. Tyus Jones, Devontae Graham. I don't think Russell Westbrook's going to the Nuggets. Patty Mills, Isaiah Thomas. Like that's it for guys that are labeled as point guards on Spot Track.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like really slim pickings at this point.
I just wonder, I think we had a question in here as well. If, they said Kojo signed with Orlando. Missed that one. My bad. If there was another trade, do you guys think another trade is going to happen? This is from DJ Griffin. I would assume there's a chance they still could be the third team in a trade, but I don't think anything substantial outside of that.
Yeah, like they still have some cap space that they can burn. I think roster wise, you're looking at the roster at being somewhat at a point of completeness. So maybe some deal comes along that just makes too much sense to pass on, then that does happen. But to me, it seems more like a signing than a trade. But again, I think it's really tough to say. Like I would think that there's going to be some type of transaction, whether that's a trade or what. I think it's tougher to peg down, but I do see another transaction happening this summer.
Yeah. So Patrick asked about Klintman on defense. We kind of talked about that. Okay, so here's one that's Truck Brewer and Patrick also. So Truck said, the best thing out of Summer League, isn't it nice that somebody we have penciled in as a regular season starter isn't on the Summer League roster? Progress, LOL. Yeah. And Patrick says, it's possible no one on the Summer League roster is in the day run rotation this year. I think that's possible. I mean, we talked about it with Sasser. And then Holland, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't play on opening night. I still think that because of the roster and it's not overly loaded at the 3 position, that he could find minutes. But I don't think Ron Holland's playing 20 minutes on opening night. I think it could be like 10 to 15 or something like that.
Yeah, 10 to 15 seems much more likely to me. But if there is somebody who's in the day one rotation from the summer league team, then obviously that likely would be Ron Holland.
We'll go through these a little quick because we just got a fun one that I think we'll get into. Mel says,
Yeah.
did you happen to see Ivy at Summer League? Seemed to like he's a little distant from the other guys. Jaden Ivey's a little bit different. I think it's hard to kind of just judge his demeanor. He's not when I've seen him and stuff like that, it just doesn't seem like he's as outgoing and all of that. So from Flatix, if you had to pick one no call non-all-star, my bad, to pair along Cade Cunningham, who would it be? Based on fit, I'd go Miles Turner. And also they said, hey, guys, join in the chat here, so we'd love to hear your answers as well. Miles Turner is a really interesting fit. I love that archetype of big anyway, so a floor spacing big that also protects the rim, so I love that call. I don't know who this guy is. I also think a guard next to him that spaces the floor and then really defends, like takes on the primary defensive I guess it would be like a younger version of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's what I think would fit best next to him in the backcourt.
Yeah, I was going to say like a Derek White type, like a guy who can really handle the secondary playmaking, pick up the tougher defensive assignment, and he's become a very, very good three-point shooter as well. I mean, you could say like an Alex Caruso or that type of guy.
Yeah.
I had a hard time thinking of a non-all-star big I would pair with Cade for some reason. Like Miles Turner, I think is the archetype.
Chet's not an all-star yet.
Chet's not an all-star yet. I mean, yeah, like I could say Chet or Evan Mobley, but both of those guys are probably gonna make an all-star game at some point. So, I feel like that would be cheating a little bit. No, I just more so thought like guard or wing as far as that. So if you could get like a Derek White type, I think you'd be in great shape.
Yeah. Desmond Bane.
Desmond Bane. No, he hasn't been an all-star.
Yeah. Steven Sugg says Asar or Holland on day one. I would say Asar definitely has the inside track, assuming health. DJ Griffin said JB normally used 8 or 9 man rotations in Cleveland. That's another thing to really consider here is I think just for simplicity's sake, we always say like too deep, just because, I mean, for me, it's from playing like college football and Madden and stuff like that, but that's not always the way that it works out.
No.
All right. So we answered the other trade. Let's go to this because I want to keep the fun one for the very last. So Kian says very broadly, when do you cite a player is what he is? Like Sasser is in a 4-year senior on his second year with the second coach. Can he still learn to change as a point guard? Aberration, but like Brook Lopez evolved. This is a really interesting one and one that I've struggled with, Kian. It was like Killian Hayes. It was, he's only played this many games. He's still only this old. And then eventually it seemed like it crossed that line really, really fast, Omari, to, well, he's not that young anymore and he's played this many games and it's just not going to work. I would say, I will answer this a little more broadly. I think it is harder for players to change their role and archetype than what we give it credit for. I think it's real easy for us to say, go play off the ball or go play this role or go play that role. Think about some of these guys. Think about if you played with ball in hand through junior high, through high school, college, all of that. And then now you want to come in and, year 10 in the NBA and it's like, hey, go space the floor in the corner. I just don't think that stuff is as easy as we think sometimes. So I think what I would say is it's a lot harder to do that. If Sasser is wired to be a scorer first, second, and third, I don't think it's that easy to change the mindset to be a pass first, create for others guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think some of it is like obviously the younger you are, the more malleable you are in theory. Some of that to me is like physical tools, right? Like I think Brook Lopez was always a guy who had pretty good touch. So him becoming like he could shoot from mid range before he really expanded his
80%
range.
80% free throw shooter his last year in college, 80% Omari.
So there was always some, sign that he could become that down the road, even if I think he was really sort of at the head of the three-point revolution as far as bigs learning to shoot. So he was ahead of the curve in that regard. But in hindsight, he's the exact type of big that you would draft and try to develop into a shooter, obviously with hindsight. So I would say, oh, wait, I was not trying to click on that. Yeah. But
I was just going to finish real quick as well. Yeah. The one caveat to that is a veteran on their last legs who hey, you're only going to stay in the league if you figure out this role. So you better
Yeah.
change your mindset. So,
And the other thing, because I was going to say with Dennis Smith, he came in as like a high flying point guard. You probably think of
yeah.
yourself as
No,
an
that's a
offensive
good one.
engine,
That's a great one.
but he had the tools to be a defender, and he eventually learned this is my, place in the NBA is to be the defender. This is what's going to keep me on a roster. So Sasser could embrace that part, like as he learns what parts of his game he has to really hone in on. But he's not going to suddenly become like a plus defender in the sense that he's guarding guys way bigger than him, right? I think that's a physical limitation. So
exactly.
you look at both.
All right, we have 2 fun questions here that I really want to talk about. So thank you to everybody for the questions. If you have some more, save them for next episode. We'll answer them then. But I want to get to we're going to shift gears here. So if you're only here for Pistons talk, you might want to tune out now because we're going to go a little bit fun. Will K says, off-season question: are either of y'all big into grilling or smoking? So Omari, what are you doing at your spot there? You doing any grilling or smoking anything?
No, I'm not grilling at my spot because my apartment doesn't allow grills on the roof.
You don't have a little patio that you can just
Nah, I don't have any
so
access to
so everything's
grilling
just
at
in
my
the
apartment.
kitchen.
So everything's just out the kitchen. But my parents have a grill in their backyard. So for my mom's birthday, for Labor Day, like Memorial Day, like I'll go over there and I'm usually the one that grills now. It used to be my dad, but I usually do it more so now. So I do enjoy grilling. If I had grilling facilities at my apartment, I would grill a lot more. But I haven't really smoked though. That's like more of a long-term goal for me is to learn how to smoke.
So I have not cooked a meal other than a breakfast since my wife and I got married. So she takes care of everything. She crushes it. She's actually doing it right now. She's grilling something right now as we record this. She takes care of all of it. Whenever it's my turn to cook, it's Subway night or pizza, or I'll drive to, it's about a 20-minute drive to get to like real fast food chains or B-Dubs or something like that. Not one breakfast. I make usually Sunday morning breakfast. I will say the one thing I do a good job of is I make really good scrambled eggs. So I make the breakfast together for the family, but that's about all I do in terms of that. But she tricked me into buying her like the best Traeger on the market because she didn't tell me how cheap. I assumed they were really expensive. And so I had a number in mind and she just never told me otherwise. So she got a top of the market Traeger and she's able to do some pretty good stuff. Wes says he grills, wish he could invest the money and time to smoke meat, but that's not in the cards. So I enjoy eating. I have a lot of fun with it, but I am not good at actually doing it. But I like a little barbecue set outside. I like the smell of it, set out, have a good time with people. Our neighbors, I guess they're not, but across the street, we grill with them a lot. Last one, Sam Ermed. What was the best meal you had in Vegas? So this will be a good one because we only shared one meal. What was the spot we ate at?
We went to the Cajun seafood spot across the street.
Yeah. I couldn't remember what it was named, but
which was pretty good.
No, it was good. It was a nice little lunch we had there. It was good, but I assume that probably wasn't your best.
It wasn't. Well, my best is like it's the same every year. Like Lotus Aseum, like I love Thai food. That's one of the best Thai restaurants in the country, and like their fried garlic prawns are just like 10 out of 10. Could eat them every single day. Never get tired of it. So that's like my third or fourth year in a row nominating Lotus Aseum as my best meal. But you had some pretty interesting meals too out there. I saw. So
yeah. So actually. So Will K says, I love my $100 Weber grill. I would just say this, Will, she talked me into something more expensive than $100 Weber grill. I will say that. And I was not happy.
That's a good gift.
I was not happy whenever I figured out that she had played me. I should have done more research. This was my fault. So after we had the seafood, I actually went to a hotel and had a meal with some people. Had some incredible chocolate chip pancakes, Omar. I felt like a little kid ordering it in a room full of adults, but I just couldn't. We ate at the Waldorf, the restaurant in there. The plate was hot. The butter melted on the pancakes. The syrup stayed hot throughout the whole thing. Really good. But my best friend from high school went with me this year. This was my wife's off year from going with me to Vegas. And we ate at Haleho, I guess is how you say it, in the Cosmopolitan. It was really, really good. It was awesome. Great meal. So that was definitely my best meal there was at that one. We ate at Gordon Ramsay Burger and some of the other places, but Haleho in Cosmopolitan was awesome. I will say probably the most money I've ever spent on a meal in my life. And I only want to do that every once every 5 years, maybe. I didn't feel good about it, but it was good. And then I got to hang out with you. That was the night we hung out for a little
Always.
while in the Cosmo and got to spend some time together and chill. But yeah, I do enjoy Vegas, and I do splurge a little bit on the food whenever we're there.
Yeah, Vegas is also the city I've spent the most money on a meal at. It was me, Vince Ellis, and then Sean. We have Sean
Yeah.
on the pod a lot, but this was probably 2 years ago. We went to a spot that Vince likes to go to. I mean, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it was more like a steak type place. And it was really good. It was really good. For me, there's a threshold for food where you pay so much that I feel like it's like I could have paid like $50 to $100 less and still probably got something just as good. But it was still really good though. Great service, like no complaints at all.
Yeah, YouTube user says, Bryce, you get what you pay for. Think of the quality meals your wife cooks.
That's right.
Absolutely. And she enjoyed, like, she has all the tools that goes with it. She does a great job. We went down, this was the first time. Have you been to Fremont Street in Vegas? Have you ever gone down there?
Yeah, I went last year for a little bit, and it's like I like the vibe a lot better just because the strip is like a giant Chuck E. Cheese after a while, and it's just like I got to get somewhere.
Did you
that
go
feels
to
more
the
normal.
Fremont experience though? Like that
Yes,
was,
you walk through. Yeah,
no, I was
cool.
out. No, it's not cool.
It's cool. What's wrong with the experience?
No, we walked all the way to one end and I was like, can we please get a taxi here? I do not want to walk back through this, but we wanted to be like by a hotel to make sure the taxi or the Uber was able to find us. So then we walked back through it. I was out. I was over it by the end, but we went down there because we ate at 8 East down there, which is a nice, it's in Circa, which the Circa hotel is the one that has the pool, sports betting thing and all of that. We didn't do that.
We walked through there last year. Like I don't think we had any food there, but Fremont's cool. Like you can get like an affordable meal, like probably the only place in Vegas you could get like an actual, well, not the only place in Vegas, but compared to the strip, you could pay $15 and get like way more food for the money.
Yeah, the 8 East it was good, but okay. Yeah. So we ate green beans and they made my tongue tingle. Like, remember the flower drink at Cosmo?
Yeah.
It was the exact same thing. And so I pulled the waiter over and I was like, hey, what? And I don't remember what it's called, whatever they sauce or whatever they put on the green beans, but that's what it does. And it was kind of interesting because it kind of changed the taste of the rest of the meal. But
you're becoming a spice guy.
Huh?
You're becoming a spice guy.
Wes, you better cook Wes for this. Wes says Panda Express at 3 a.m. about 5 years ago. Best Vegas meal I ever had.
All right, but Wes, we got to get you out to Vegas, and we got to. I like Panda Express. I'll defend Panda Express.
Sure,
we got to like Vegas has that. Like we could do better, Wes.
2 years ago, we had Chick-fil-A at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm sure it tasted great, but it wasn't the best meal we had while we were there. So,
not the best meal, no.
Wes, real quick, as we're closing it out, what's your best meal overseas so far? Wes has been over in Europe here for the last week.
I think he's in Vienna now.
Yeah, I wasn't sure where he was at. Like, I'm just always impressed that he has good enough Wi-Fi to join us. So give us this, and then we'll let Omari close it out and let everybody go. So Steven says that ain't it, Wes. Steven, you are absolutely correct. This is one time I'm very confident that on Twitter, nobody's going to be cooking me for my food taste. Oh man,
he said Omari in London.
Amazing
Italian food.
There you go. All right, so good stuff, guys. This was a lot of fun. I'm always impressed by the turnout, even as we really enter the off season now. But we'll find plenty of great stuff to bring you over the next couple months. Thank you guys for tuning in again. So that way it gets out on YouTube more. Subscribe, especially if you're from Twitter over on YouTube now. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever, rate, review, just continue to help us grow this thing out and become the best Pistons podcast out there. Omari, Wes, thank you. Hope you guys are having fun. Travel safe. Omari, take it away, my guy.
All right. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and a big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always. And I believe he'll be back domestic this time next week. So we'll talk to you all soon.